An apology is supposed to be a reckoning, not a rebrand. Yet here comes Kody, polished, practiced, and conveniently vague, serving, "I want to apologize," the way a publicist serves a crisis statement. Carefully portioned, softly lit, and allergic to specifics. So the real question is simple. Is this remorse, or is it a PR move? Watch what happens when the script gets challenged. Robin gets asked about a wife coming back, and suddenly, hope turns into a panicked escape hatch. Janelle hears the performance, and instead of holding him to the damage, especially the damage done to the kids, there's a giggle, a gentle excuse, a doorway left cracked open. Meanwhile, Christine is out here refusing to suffer on schedule, which somehow becomes the biggest offense of all. In the next minute, the language gets dissected, because the truth is always hiding in what he refuses to say. The modern reality television ecosystem rarely offers genuine surprise, but it occasionally delivers something even more startling. A moment of unguarded sincerity that briefly punctures the carefully laminated narratives. One such moment arrives in the form of an in-person encounter with Christine, an interaction described with the kind of reverence usually reserved for saints, therapists, or people who return shopping carts without being asked. The emotional weight is not performative. A stepmother's tears, a divorce survived, a child emboldened to stand up to a domineering father. Whatever one thinks of the franchise's theatricality, it is difficult to dismiss the real-life impact a public figure can have when viewers recognize themselves in the wreckage. And then, in a flourish that is equal parts devotion and spectacle, David appears, wearing a shirt featuring Christine, as if subtlety were a vice to be avoided at all costs. The message is clear. Admiration is not merely felt, it is merchandised. Naturally, this prompts the predictable backlash, the reflexive suspicion toward any new partner entering a televised family saga. Yet, the defense of David is not complicated. He is presented as a decent catch, not because perfection is expected, but because the bar has been placed somewhere near the Earth's mantle after years of Kody Brown's self-involved pageantry. A man who openly signals affection, who appears to enjoy his partner rather than compete with her for attention, registers as a radical development in this universe. The criticism of him, in that framing, becomes less about evidence and more about habit, an audience conditioned to anticipate the worst because the show has trained them well. If the standard comparison is Kody, then 1,000,000% better is not hyperbole so much as basic arithmetic performed in the rubble of a collapsed marriage economy. If Christine's segment offers warmth, Robin's interview offers something else. The unmistakable sound of a narrative engine stalling mid-spin. When asked how she would feel if one of the wives decided to come back, the response is not thoughtful. It is frantic. The visible scramble, the halting search for an answer that sounds acceptable, the awkward pivot into vagueness. This is not the posture of a woman holding on to hope. This is the posture of a person caught without a script. The performance begins as an attempt at politeness, collapses into avoidance, and finally retreats behind a familiar shield. The insistence that the topic is too painful to discuss. Pain, in this context, functions less as an emotion and more as a press credential, an all-access pass that shuts down follow-up questions while preserving a flattering self-image. Even the threatened walk-off reads less like distress and more like control. If the narrative cannot be managed, the scene will simply end. What makes the exchange so revealing is not merely the fluster. It is what the fluster exposes. Years of carefully curated right answers, Years of being positioned as the fragile, misunderstood figure are briefly undermined by a single question that requires an honest reaction. The mask slips. Disgust tries to dress itself up as wounded optimism. The infamous "hope can be painful" line lands as an attempt to sound noble while avoiding the far more plausible truth. The idea of another wife returning threatens the arrangement Robin has benefited from, particularly the allocation of time, affection, and resources. The fear is not romantic competition so much as logistical redistribution. A returning wife is not merely an emotional complication. She is a budget line item. In that light, the panicked evasiveness makes perfect sense. It is not heartbreak. It is accounting. And then there is the broader accusation hovering over Robin like a persistent odor. Disingenuousness as a lifestyle. The smugness, the smirk, the selective sympathy for other people's struggles, especially the melodramatic commentary about how difficult dating is these days, lands poorly when placed beside the widely held belief that she did not stumble into this marriage so much as pursue it with strategic determination. The portrait painted is not of a reluctant participant in a complicated religious culture, but of a woman who understood the system, navigated it, and now performs innocence as though the audience has no memory. The sanctimony about online dating becomes particularly rich when contrasted with the implied history of actively seeking out opportunities within a specific religious community. When someone behaves as if modern dating is a tragedy, while having allegedly treated the courtship process like a cross-country campaign, sympathy is not the natural response. Sarcasm is. Robin's credibility problems are amplified by her apparent delight in the discomfort of others. The observation is blunt. She does not feel sorry for the women re-entering the dating world. She appears pleased they have to suffer. The notion that she believes it is what they deserve may be uncharitable, but it fits neatly with the recurring image of her as someone who benefits from the fallout while mourning loudly for the cameras. The one exception to her satisfaction, of course, is Christine's refusal to suffer on schedule. Christine's swift transition into a happy relationship is framed as an offense against Robin's preferred storyline. If others are meant to pay a price for leaving, then Christine's contentment is a narrative crime. Which brings the focus to the episode's most divisive center, Janelle, and the recurring question of whether she is truly finished with Kody or simply taking a long, scenic detour. The theory presented is not subtle. Janelle will go back. The evidence, as argued, is a blend of history and temperament. Years of accommodating sacrifice, including living in an RV, a pattern of putting Kody first, and a willingness to prioritize the marital bond even when the children's needs are glaring. In this reading, the affection displayed is not incidental. It is predictive. The claim is sharper still. She values their sex life over her children, or at least has historically treated the marriage as the central axis around which everything else must rotate. The comparison to her mother's life offers a grim sense of inheritance. An older woman who once claimed she never planned on polygamy, then stayed anyway because love, or attachment, or habit, or ideology, proved stronger than intention. The implication is that Janelle may tell herself she is different, but the pattern suggests otherwise. From there, the imagined roadmap to reconciliation is laid out with almost bureaucratic precision. First, a falling out between Robin and Kody. Perhaps not divorce, but enough conflict to push him out of the only household still tolerating his ego full-time. Second, Janelle, ever the practical harbor, takes him in. Third, The Tata Farms venture becomes the financial and logistical sinkhole many side hustles become when enthusiasm outruns competence. The prediction is that it will either cost too much or fail outright, forcing a sell-off after a year or two of attempted domestic peace. Then comes Wyoming, the final gravitational pull in this storyline. Janelle is expected to settle there eventually, partly because she has proven she can live under almost any conditions, partly because she has family ties, and most painfully, because Garrison is buried there. The argument is that grief, geography, and identity will converge until Wyoming becomes not merely an option, but an inevitability. And if Kody wants a gigantic barn-dominium, the suggestion is that Janelle might build it, welcoming him back into a life she claims to have left. Hovering over all of this is the image of Kody himself as a man play-acting his own mythology. The cowboy patriarch, surrounded by adoring wives, driving a ridiculous convertible through tumbleweeds, trying to recreate his father's legacy with less competence and more hair. The contempt here is not subtle. He is described as a duplicitous con man, flamboyant in self-regard and allergic to accountability. His apologies are treated as performances designed to rehabilitate his image, not repair his damage. The distinction matters. Saying, "I want to apologize," is a prelude. Saying, "I'm sorry is ownership. The accusation is that Kody prefers the former because it allows him to appear humble while remaining safely vague. He crafts statements that minimize responsibility and maximize sympathy. Word salad dressed as moral growth. That is why Janelle's demeanor in the apology conversation inspires such fury. The complaint is not merely that she listened. It is that she accommodated. She giggled. She excused. She offered soft framing, no instruction manual, as if 3 decades of relational chaos were a charming misunderstanding rather than a sustained pattern of neglect and manipulation. The disgust is visceral because the stakes are not abstract. Kody's cruel treatment of the children, particularly Gabe and Garrison, is referenced repeatedly as the moral center Janelle is accused of abandoning in that moment. The most damning line of critique insists that the only appropriate response should have been blunt and maternal. Call the children, apologize to them, repair what was broken where it mattered most. Anything else is framed as betrayal, or at minimum, a selfish prioritization of personal closure over parental responsibility. The anger escalates around the mention of Garrison's death. The argument, on its harshest edge, is that a mother should be incapable of warmth toward a man associated with that level of pain. Some describe unbridled rage as the only honest emotional register available after such a loss. In that view, forgiveness is not strength. It is capitulation. The dinner conversation becomes a slap in the face to the children, an utter disappointment, an evidence that Janelle is still susceptible, still naive, still shaped by a culture and religion that trained women to place the husband above all else. The contempt extends beyond Janelle to the broader cast. The claim that all of them prioritized Kody over their children, with the mitigating note that this is what their belief system teaches, though the mitigation does not absolve. Kody remains, in this moral accounting, the central villain. Yet, buried within the outrage is a countermelody, an objection not to Kody's behavior, but to the certainty with which outsiders prescribe grief. This perspective rejects the theatrical demands of vengeance and calls the judgment itself offensive, especially for families personally marked by suicide and estrangement. It insists on humility. No one knows the full scope of what Garrison was struggling with. No one sees the friendships, The relationships, the work pressures, the military life, factors that may shape a person far more than a parent already experienced as unreliable. The argument emphasizes a harsh truth. It is extraordinarily difficult to get another competent adult help if they refuse it. Helplessness is not a moral failure. It is often the reality. And most pointedly, the claim is that no one makes anyone kill themselves. Mental illness does. In this framing, demanding that a grieving mother sustain a lifetime of rage is not righteous. It is cruelly unrealistic. Grief drains the body. It does not recruit it for endless battle. That same perspective also introduces an important caution about what television shows. Viewers do not see every conversation. They see edited fragments. They do not know what Janelle has discussed with her children privately, nor what the children may have requested of her in terms of boundaries, peace, or public restraint. The insistence that a parent must litigate every injury on camera ignores a possibility many adult children prefer: that the parental relationship with an ex-partner remain separate from the children's relationship with that parent. Some families, for survival, compartmentalize. Some people choose apathy over confrontation because confrontation offers no repair, only exhaustion. In that view, the lack of a shouting match is not weakness. It is the refusal to spend remaining energy on a man who will not change. A relationship dies more decisively from indifference than from anger. This is where the editorial critique becomes more interesting, because it exposes the show's central manipulation. It trains audiences to confuse accountability with volume. The desire to see Janelle publicly humiliate Kody is understandable. He has earned 1,000 uncomfortable moments. But the demand that she do it in a particular emotional key, rage, contempt, scorched earth, ignores how grief can reorder priorities. The death of a child can make the petty war of ex-spouses feel meaningless, even when the ex-spouse is objectively culpable in other ways. That does not excuse Kody. It simply acknowledges that grief does not always perform moral purity on cue. Still, the criticism of Janelle does not depend solely on the expectation of rage. It depends on patterns. The argument is that she has never held his feet to the fire unless it affects her directly, that she responds to his familiar playbook because it worked for 30 years. The playbook is described with grim clarity. Bond over a shared enemy, often Mary. Frame Janelle as the safest wife. Deploy charisma, and let nostalgia do the rest. Kody's charm, whether others see it or not, is presented as a lever he knows how to pull. And the show itself once suggested that he was accustomed to getting his way. Even the therapist, Nancy, is invoked as someone who observed his near-total success at controlling outcomes. When that control slipped, when wives refused to shun each other, when Janelle would not exile her sons, his real self emerged. Meaner, harsher, less polished. The critique goes further, arguing that this cruelty may echo what he witnessed from his father, learned as a tactic when love bombing failed. The apology tour, then, reads less like redemption and more like brand management. The complaint is that Kody chooses what he will apologize for, limiting himself to what he personally believes he is responsible for, which, conveniently, is almost nothing. He offers vague regret while ignoring the specific harms that demand specific repair. Abandonment, verbal cruelty, fractured relationships with grandchildren who barely know him. The frustration is intensified by the perception that Janelle enabled the performance by not asking questions, not insisting on clarity, not naming the damage. Being the first stop on the tour is framed as a dubious honor, an early bird special at the restaurant of accountability theater. The critique does not spare the other original wives either. Christine is accused of leaving primarily because Kody would not sleep with her, dressing it up as concern about modeling loveless marriage for her children while tolerating much worse behavior until her own needs were denied. The argument lists past neglect, suggestions around surgery and illness, as moments that should have triggered departure if child-centered ethics were truly driving the decision. Mary is framed as someone who did not leave so much as get frozen out, making her story less a choice than a slow eviction. In this cynical view, if Kody offers Christine an apology, she will accept, not because he deserves it, but because the show's emotional economy rewards closure arcs, and the cast has never been immune to narrative convenience. So what is left after the giggles, the smirks, the evasions, the word salad apologies, and the audience's competing moral demands? A portrait of a family that has spent decades confusing endurance with virtue. Robin's panic reveals that the hope storyline was always more useful than true. She wants control, not reconciliation. Kody's apology language reveals that accountability is still something he treats like a negotiable fee, not a moral obligation. Janelle's softness reveals either dangerous attachment or strategic detachment, perhaps both at once, because humans are not tidy. And the audience's anger reveals something equally telling. After years of watching harm go unaddressed, there is a hunger to see consequences with teeth, not platitudes with lighting. The real tragedy, of course, is that the people who most deserved protection, the children, rarely get to be the center of the adult decisions that reshape their lives. That is why the simplest demand keeps resurfacing, stripped of theatrics. Call the children. Apologize to them. Repair what can be repaired where it matters. The rest, the romantic nostalgia, the interviews, the smirks, the on-camera trembling about painful hope, is just set dressing around a question that has always been the show's unspoken indictment. What is the value of a family structure that constantly asks the children to absorb the cost of adult ego? Subscribe for more video.